Victor Hale had been called many things in his lifetime. Visionary, shark, kingmaker, but never desperate. He was the kind of man who could walk into a boardroom full of rivals and walk out with every handshake in his favor. Orion Industries, the company he had built from a single startup, stood as a gleaming monument to his power. But now, all the towers, titles and fortunes meant nothing. Not when it came to his daughter. Lily Hale had once been the heartbeat of his life. A girl with eyes that danced when she laughed. A curious mind always brimming with questions. She had inherited her mother's warmth and his own stubborn spark. But that light had dimmed 6 months ago, the night of the accident. It had been a rainy evening. Victor was away on a business trip when the call came. Lily had been in a car crash on her way back from her ballet recital. She survived, but something in her world had shattered. Physically, she healed quickly. The doctors called her recovery remarkable, but her voice, it never came back. She can speak, the specialist explained, but she won't. It's psychological, a form of selective mutism triggered by trauma. Victor threw every resource at the problem. The best speech therapists, child psychologists, and behavioral specialists were flown into their penthouse suite. They tried games, songs, and flashcards. They spoke gently, firmly, playfully. Nothing worked. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The only sound Lily made was the soft tapping of her fingers on her chair, as if she were playing an invisible piano. Victor had never known helplessness like this. In business, there was always a counteroffer, always a leverage point. But how do you bargain with silence? One Monday morning, standing in the glass lobby of Orion Industries, Victor made a decision. He was surrounded by employees, hundreds of them gathered for the weekly corporate address. Normally these speeches were about quarterly profits and strategic goals. Today, he had no interest in balance sheets. Stepping up to the podium, his voice carried with unusual weight. You all know my daughter Lily. Some of you have met her here. Some have seen her in the papers. 6 months ago, she stopped speaking. Not because she can't, but because something inside her has made her afraid to. The crowd was still. The hum of office chatter gone. I have hired experts, flown in the best minds in the country. Nothing has worked. So now, I'm opening this to everyone, not just professionals. If you can teach her to speak again, I'll give you everything. His words echoed through the lobby. Everything was not a term Victor used lightly. It could mean a promotion, a fortune, even a piece of Orion Industries itself. Whispers spread through the gathered staff. Some assumed it was a figure of speech. Victor was a dramatic man, after all. Others exchanged quick, calculating looks. I don't care who you are, Victor continued. You could be a manager, a receptionist, an intern. If you can bring her voice back, you'll be rewarded beyond your wildest dreams. Then, with a final glance at the sea of faces, he turned and left, his tall frame cutting through the silence like a blade. For most, the announcement was just another story to gossip about over coffee. For others, it was an opportunity to impress the boss. But for one man standing at the edge of the crowd, a man in a navy blue janitor's uniform with a mop in hand, it was something else entirely. Daniel Cruz didn't care about money, and he had no idea why those words had struck him so deeply. All he knew was that when Victor spoke about his daughter, there had been a flicker of pain in his eyes that Daniel recognized. It was the look of someone who had lost something irreplaceable. Daniel Cruz was a quiet man in a loud world. Every day, long before the executives filled the offices and the phones began ringing, he was already there, mopping the marble floors, polishing the chrome railings, emptying trash bins in the glass-walled conference rooms, where billion-dollar deals were made. He had been at Orion Industries for years, long enough to learn the rhythms of the place. He knew which managers always arrived early to impress Victor Hale, which interns took extra coffee breaks, and which department heads spoke with power only when Victor wasn't in the room. But to most of them, Daniel was invisible, and he preferred it that way. That Monday, after the CEO's starting announcement, Daniel noticed something unusual in the air. The lobby buzzed with whispers. Some employees were already making plans, calling relatives who were therapists, Googling new speech recovery techniques, even wondering how much everything might be worth in real terms. Daniel didn't join the chatter. He simply picked up his mop and went about his work. But that night, as he passed the therapy room on his way to the supply closet, he paused. The room was dim, except for a single lamp by the window. Lily Hale sat curled in an armchair, her knees pulled up, a book open in her lap. She wasn't reading. Her gaze was far away, fixed on something beyond the glass. Her small hand traced invisible shapes on the window pane, as if drawing on a canvas only she could see. Daniel's chest tightened. He didn't know her personally, but in that moment, she didn't look like the daughter of a billionaire. She looked like a lonely little girl who had been left behind by the world. He almost kept walking. Almost. But instead he found himself saying softly, "Hey, sunshine." The words slipped out before he could think about them. He used to call his own daughter that. Lily didn't respond. Her eyes flickered toward him, just for a moment, before turning back to the window. "Nice night," Daniel said quietly. "Almost looks like the stars are trying to peek through the city lights." No answer. He smiled faintly, nodded to himself and moved on. The next day, he passed by again. This time, he had something in his hand, a small piece of paper, folded twice. Without saying a word, he placed it on the table beside her and walked away. When Lily unfolded it, she found a drawing of a little fox holding a balloon. The day after that, he left another. This time, a turtle wearing a crown, then a penguin with a tiny scarf. Daniel didn't try to talk to her. He didn't ask her questions or expect a reaction. He just left the drawings and went on with his work. A week later, as he set a new picture on the table, a smiling sunflower, wearing sunglasses, he heard something faint. It was a sound so small, he almost missed it. A giggle. He froze. Turning slightly, he saw Lily with the corners of her lips curled up. She was holding the sunflower, drawing close to her chest, her eyes meeting his for the first time. "You like that one?" he asked gently. She didn't speak, but she nodded. For Daniel, it wasn't much, just a smile, just a nod. But after months of silence, it was a crack in the wall, a sign that somewhere inside her, the light was still there. That night, Daniel sat in the janitor's lounge, staring at the ceiling. He thought about Victor's promise. He thought about the fortune and promotions others were chasing. He wasn't chasing any of that, for reasons he couldn't explain. He just wanted to see Lily laugh again. Over the next 2 weeks, Daniel kept up his quiet ritual. Every day he'd pass by Lily's therapy room and leave a drawing on the table. He never waited for a reaction, never hovered, never made her feel like she was under a microscope. He noticed the drawings starting to pile up neatly on her desk. She'd arrange them in rows, sometimes color them in with her own pencils. One day, he saw that she'd taped the sunflower drawing to the wall above her bed. It was a Tuesday morning when Daniel walked in with something different. Instead of a drawing, he carried a small harmonica in his hand. It was old, the brass dulled from years of use. He had bought it for his daughter, Mia, a long time ago, before life had taken a sharp turn and he lost her to an illness that no doctor could cure. "Thought you might like to hear a song," he said softly, standing in the doorway. Lily glanced up from her book. Her gaze lingered on the harmonica. Without another word, Daniel lifted it to his lips and began to play. The tune was slow and gentle, the kind of melody that wrapped around a person like a warm blanket. It wasn't perfect. He hit a note or two off, but it was real, and it was his. When he finished, Lily was staring at him. Her eyes glistened, though she didn't try. Instead, she held out her small hand, palm up. Daniel placed the harmonica in it. She ran her fingers over the smooth brass, then pressed it to her lips. She blew once, just enough to make a single wobbly note. He grinned. "Not bad." "Sunshine?" "Not bad at all." Something shifted after that. The next day, Lily motioned for him to sit with her, while she colored in one of his fox drawings. The day after, she pushed a small notepad toward him. Inside, she had drawn her own picture, a little girl with long hair standing next to a tall man holding a mop. "That's me?" he asked, with a smile. She nodded. It was on Friday afternoon, when the sky outside was turning a soft gold, that the breakthrough came. Daniel was sweeping the hallway when he heard it. At first he thought it was the echo of someone else's conversation, but it wasn't. It was too soft, too tentative. He turned the corner and saw Lily standing in the therapy room doorway, clutching the harmonica in both hands, her lips parted. Daniel, his broom, slipped from his hands. He froze, hardly daring to breathe. "Say that again." She took a shaky breath. Daniel, the sound of her voice, quiet, raspy from disuse, hit him harder than any applause or reward ever could. It was like hearing a bird sing after a long, bitter winter. "That's me," he said, smiling, his throat tightening. "That's my name." Lily's eyes sparkled. "Thank you." 2 words. Just 2 words. But they carried the weight of a mountain. Daniel didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He crouched so they were eye level and said gently, "No, sunshine. Thank you." They stayed like that for a moment, just looking at each other. No walls between them anymore. When Daniel walked back to the janitor's lounge that night, he didn't tell anyone what had happened. He didn't run to Victor Hale. Didn't claim the prize. Some things, he thought, were too sacred to be turned into transactions, but Victor would find out soon enough. Victor Hale had been pacing in his office for most of the morning. The floor-to-ceiling windows behind him overlooked the city, but he barely noticed the view. His mind was on the same problem it had been for months. His daughter's silence. The specialists had tried. Therapists, speech pathologists, even experimental AI-driven communication programs. None of it had worked. And every day that passed without hearing her voice gnawed at him. That afternoon, his phone buzzed. It was Lily's personal nurse. "Mr. Hale, you need to come to the therapy room now." His stomach tightened. Is something wrong? There was a pause. "You'll see." When Victor stepped into the room, he stopped cold. Lily was sitting in the center, holding a harmonica, and beside her was the janitor. Daniel stood there awkwardly, his hands tucked behind his back, as if he wasn't sure whether he should stay or slip out. "Lily," Victor said softly, moving closer. She looked up at him with clear, steady eyes. Then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, she spoke. "Hi, Daddy." The sound of her voice after all these months, it hit Victor like a punch to the chest. His knees felt weak, and he reached for the back of a chair to steady himself. You're speaking." She nodded, smiling faintly. "Daniel helped me." Victor's gaze shifted to the janitor, his brow furrowing in disbelief. "You?" Daniel cleared his throat. "I didn't do much, sir. Just listened, talked to her a little, drew some silly pictures, played some music. She did the rest." Victor stepped forward, his eyes sharp now. "Do you realize what you've done? Every doctor I hired failed. And you, someone who sweeps the floors, managed to get her to speak again." Daniel almost chuckled, but there was no arrogance in it. "Sometimes, sir, people don't need a doctor. They just need someone who sees them." The room was silent for a beat. Then Victor straightened, his businesslike tone returning. "You remember what I said? If someone could make her speak again, I'd give them everything." Daniel raised his palms. "Mr. Hale, I'm not looking for a reward." But Victor cut him off. "No, you've earned it." He turned to his assistant, who had been standing in the doorway. "Draft a contract. Effective immediately, Mr. Daniel Cruz is promoted to Director of Employee Well-being. 6-figure salary. Full benefits, and I want his debts, whatever they are, wiped clean." Daniel blinked, stunned. "Sir." Victor stepped closer, lowering his voice. "This isn't just payment. This is my way of saying, I trust you. You brought my daughter back to me. That's worth more than any deal I've ever made." Daniel didn't know what to say. For a man who had spent years blending into the background, suddenly standing in the spotlight felt surreal. Then Lily tugged at his sleeve. "Daniel?" He looked down at her. She held up one of his drawings, the little fox, holding a balloon. "Will you still visit me?" His throat tightened. Every day, sunshine. Every day. Victor watched them, his expressions softening. He realized something in that moment, something no amount of money had ever taught him. Healing didn't always come from the top. Sometimes it came from the most unexpected hands. The three of them stood together in the warm afternoon light, streaming through the window. Outside, the city moved on, cars honking, deals being made, people rushing through their lives. But in that small therapy room, time slowed. It wasn't about wealth, titles, or rewards anymore. It was about a bond that had formed quietly, like a seed pushing through concrete, breaking into the sunlight. Victor would later sign the paperwork. Daniel would accept the position, and life at Orion Industries would change. But the real reward wasn't on paper. It was in the sound of Lily's voice, soft, steady, alive, and the knowledge that a janitor had reminded them both of the simple power of being seen.